Oh, hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here from Zoobox, and Jeremy is with me. We're going to do a little quick conversation, just a little quick hit about the recently released film, Brandon Cronenberg's Infinity Pool. Now, both Jeremy and I have only seen it one time. We saw it yesterday. It's still fresh in our minds. I think we're still kind of working through it. So we're just going to give some kind of brief thoughts. If we go into spoilers, I will make sure to warn you guys. And yeah. So, Jeremy. Now, I know you're a big David Cronenberg fan, but had you watched any? Are you familiar with Brandon Cronenberg's other movies, Antiviral and Possessor?
Just those other two. I haven't seen any of the short films or any of the earlier stuff he might have been involved with, but
Mm-hmm.
yes, I've seen Antiviral. I saw that around uh middle of college, I think, when that came out.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only one in my peers who had seen it. No one
Seen
wanted
it?
or cared about it. So I was like, all right, I guess this is just for me. I'll be the lone wolf for this one. And I remember liking it fine. I thought it was a little too close to his dad's uh
Yeah. Oh, for
work at the
sure.
time, and this was before I was really a little bit caught more wind about this whole nepotism baby debate happening right now with
Yeah, the Nepo
everybody. But
babies. Yeah,
yeah.
Jamie Lee Curtis, what a bitch.
Yeah.
No, I have a similar thing. Like I've never seen any of his short stuff. I don't, and I think he also does he have like a book of poetry or something? He must.
Probably.
They all have books of poetry. I've seen Antiviral. I saw Possessor. I saw Antiviral like a couple years after it came out. It was like a Netflix movie. It was on Netflix, like
Yeah, I
early days of
remember. Yeah.
Netflix. It was on there, so I was like, oh, cool. I'm a big David Cronenberg fan. Why not see what his kid is doing? I remember being pretty pleasantly surprised, but also just like you were like, "Whoa, this is like literally like a David Cronenberg movie." Like so much so that you're like, I hope you cut your dad a check or something. But it's a cool movie. It's got like an interesting subtext about just kind of social media, fame worship, celebrity culture. And I mean, because it has like a kind of unique twist on that, where it's like people love celebrities so much and hate their lives so much and want to be close to celebrities that they'll actually take on the diseases that celebrities have. So there's this whole industry about selling celebrity diseases, which I thought was like a fun metaphor for kind of the almost like the hedonistic eating yourself lifestyle of being like a wealthy famous person, and how people are just attracted to it even if it's damaging, right? Which
Mhm.
kind of is a theme that he plays with even in Possessor too, where it's just about who am I, what is my identity. Like that's like a big part of the subtext of that. What did you think of Possessor?
Possessor, I liked a bit more. I think more so on just the aesthetic scale than maybe I think some of the much more thematic content is really driving at. But it does do this whole thing about, and I was speaking with a friend about this in I guess comparing the two Cronenbergs here, and I think Brandon really is a little bit more fixated with identity crisis
Mm-hmm.
and people or what they're thinking about and what's going on in their minds, whereas David is he's more fixated with the physicality and the brutality and how the lengths and extents of what your body can go through.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
even if it is in a sci-fi sort of setting where it could just turn into a fly or something of that
Well, it's
nature.
like
But
because most of like Cronenberg stuff, David Cronenberg, that is like a lot of it's like feels like cautionary tales, especially like his early works, probably up through the '80s. Maybe that shifts a little bit once you get to the '90s. Although
yeah.
not really, actually not really. I'm thinking about it. I mean, most of them are kind of cautionary tales. It's about like the idea of like the split between, like you said, the physical and the intellectual, and how the intellectual manifests things in your body physically, whether that's through action or whether that's through some sort of transformation or whatever. And yeah, and Brandon's playing with those same ideas, but I agree with you. I think he does it in a very different way. I would say I don't want to, because I kind of have this feeling about Infinity Pool too. There is something very like one note about
Mhm.
the ideas in his movies. Whereas I feel like people like Cronenberg, and I had the same problem with a recent movie that probably people that like Infinity Pool, David Cronenberg, would probably really enjoy, Titane.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is a movie I enjoyed. I liked it. I thought it was. I really loved the aesthetic and like the kind of the tone of the movie, even if I didn't really like all of the elements of the movie. But it's another movie that just felt really kind of one note. It makes his point within 20 minutes, like 25, 30 minutes, and then it just makes that point over and over again in more extreme ways. Now we're here at Infinity Pool. We've crossed over. We're at the Infinity Pool, standing on the edge of forever. David. Sorry, pal.
Still working.
Yeah, David Cronenberg's like, hold on a second. Brandon Cronenberg's newest joint here, Infinity Pool, that stars Alexander Skarsgård, Mia Goth, Cleopatra Coleman, and other people that I wasn't really super familiar with, actually, except for maybe Thomas Kretschmann, the guy who plays like the prison warden. He was I was familiar with him. He's been around for a while. Yeah, he's like Blade 2, King Kong, Resident Evil Apocalypse. Wow, imagine having that in your resume. Wanted. Yeah, Das Boot, the remake of Das Boots, which I've never seen.
I didn't know there was a remake.
Me neither.
Holy shit.
We just found out something together.
Wow. All right, that's gonna be the next movie we feature probably on one of our programs. So.
Do Das Boot versus Das Boot.
Yeah.
So what are your initial impressions? Like, because we had talked like very briefly, like I had the same experience you had. I knew nothing about the fucking movie. I knew almost nothing. I knew who was in it. I don't even think I watched an entire trailer. I just kind of went to go see it because I was like, even if I didn't like wholeheartedly love everything Brandon Cronenberg's done, he's a guy to watch. He's interesting.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, great, I'll go check that out, and I had the opportunity to, so I did. So what are your like kind of initial impressions of the movie? What did you think?
I think this film hinges heavily on its aesthetic more than maybe the I guess even the concept kind of allows, because I was very quickly I picked up on this is a story about a guy who goes on an exotic vacation and gives in to his weird fascinations about a certain type of class and what they do on a day-to-day basis, and kind of goes down a rabbit hole, finds things in himself, but also is kind of meek and reserved. But he has this daring quality and wants to see more and more of what is going on in that world. And it reminded me, we're covering a Ted Kotcheff movie later on, but like it reminded me a lot of Wake and Fright that we covered on my show about somebody kind of just walking into their own hell by their own choosing, by their own doing. So on the one hand, I think it's a little bit different in that the dialogue doesn't appear as like on the nose when it comes to dealing with that sort of material, but it never felt fully original at the same time. So I just kind of felt like I knew what was kind of going to happen.
Yeah, as it went along. I had the same thing. It was like sometimes it was like the last thing I expected to happen, but also very obvious at the same time because of the subtext. Because of the dealing, like you said, with like class and who the haves, who gets to do what, like who gets to be basically beyond consequence. That's the phrase that like flashed into my brain. I was like, oh, this is about beyond what happens when you're beyond consequence. And yeah, I totally agree with you. And I don't think it's like, the thing is, it's like, this is like the 50th one of these fucking movies with the same theme that has come out in the past 10 years, being made by the most privileged motherfuckers on the planet, which makes it kind of ridiculous in terms of that's why they have such a shallow insight into it. I think this one is one of the better ones, though. I will say it's probably, maybe it actually might be the best one. Because like you said, it's not really that obtuse. It feels like it is. It feels like it should be, but it's not. It's actually a very straightforward movie, surprisingly enough.
Yeah, if you compare it to like dialogue with last year's The Menu, which I ended up liking fine.
Yeah, I thought it was
okay. But it was on the nose, like through and through, right down to the whole cheeseburger bit at the end, and you're thinking like, okay, I got it the first 5 minutes in. Like,
I mean, I could accept The Menu because I just looked at it as pure allegory. Like it's not real, and it's just about the commentary. It's just about the meta experience of watching it. So I could let it go. I thought Ray Fiennes was great in it. That's probably what
he was great.
Would put it over the edge for me. And I've also over the past like decade watched a lot of those like Gordon Ramsay cooking shows and Top Chef and like all that stuff. That's what happens when you get married. Start watching these cooking competition shows a lot. So yeah, I enjoyed it because of like kind of the satire of that. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think this one does a much better job of that. And it also has more interesting characters,
Mhm.
more interesting actors. Alexander Skarsgård is a guy that like I'm always like I feel like I'm on the fence about him. I can't tell
Yeah.
if I like him or not. Like he's such an empty vessel. In this, it makes sense, right? It's very
Yeah.
appropriate for this because you have a person that's lost that doesn't feel like they have an identity. They feel like he's a kept man. You know, he marries into money. He's not from the wealthy world, like you said. So he doesn't have much of an identity, which makes the thing, I guess, the conceit of the movie more interesting from the perspective of his character, which
Yeah.
adds a little bit of a nebulous nature towards the end of the movie in terms of like what is exactly going on. Um, okay, so those are our initial thoughts. I want to just spend 5 minutes, do a little spoiler talk with you,
Sure. Sure.
and then we'll call it a review. So if you guys
Yeah.
haven't seen the movie, I would recommend checking it out. I think if you are into kind of uh, short science fiction stories. Like if you are a person that likes to read collections like Philip K. Dick, um, Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, stuff like that, I think that this is actually treads in a lot of very well-worn territory in terms of like science fiction stories, the subtext, the themes, deals with class. You know, everybody's like, "Oh, it's the best take on class since Parasite." Watch out, everybody. But I think it's just like a very interestingly put together movie. And even if I kind of roll my eyes a little bit at the subtext, just because I've seen it so much, I think it overcomes most of that just through aesthetics and style. And Mia Goth fucking
I was gonna
rocks.
say her too. Like I haven't seen Pearl or X yet, but now I see the praise and the fandom that she's been spawning since.
Yeah, she's having a little bit of a moment right now, and like she keeps doing like these really kind of out there roles, and she's kind of killing it. She can really access that in herself, that manic kind of crazy all over the place bipolar shit. She's really
Yeah.
good at it. Okay, so here we go. We're going into spoilers. So the conceit of the movie is that basically human cloning. You can clone yourself. The thing is, though, the clone will actually be pretty much you. And that's and they what were they in, like Loktia? They're in some like Croatia or something like that. It's a very dangerous place.
Yeah. Like I have
I don't know if it's a real place or not. I don't know.
a family friend who was just out there recently, and I had to kind of ask like what it's really like out there. So yeah, that was my guess. Yeah, something like that.
So if you're a very wealthy person and you stay at one of these resorts and you get arrested for doing shenanigans, they have a very kind of old school form of justice out there. Like if you kill somebody, the eldest son of that family gets to come and kill you, so they can reclaim their honor, that kind of thing. But they have a caveat for rich people that aren't from the country for foreigners, so they don't have to deal with any type of disputes with other countries based on tourism, because obviously that's a big part of their economy, maybe the only part of their economy in that part of the world. And you can clone yourself, but you have to watch yourself all get executed, and yeah, and it just happens over and over and over again. And so I guess my big question: do you think that there is ever a moment? Because he does like this. There's this one sequence in the movie where they do the switcheroo,
Mhm.
which I saw coming from a million miles away. Where because they've been doing this, like he finds this group of people that Mia Goth is kind of the head of, this group of rich people that just go and just do kind of debauch things and have wild sex and kill people, do whatever they want. Like I said, they live a life beyond consequence because they understand that like basically that there is immortality is out there and they face their own death. So they just feel kind of unburdened by social norms. And do you think that there's a point where are any of these people actually their authentic selves at this point? I feel like that's the big question at the end of the movie is whether or not Alexander Skarsgård himself is a clone or not.
Yeah, I think they're definitely hitting on that message more and more, while still keeping it somewhat ambiguous. I think this might be a lazy interpretation, but I think they're also just sort of banking on just the whole, uh, maybe a lot of what you're seeing is not even happening, or or it's just like, or it's from a different, yeah, like you said, like a different point of view, or it switches a lot. You maybe it just like code switches between clones, and there's just no
Well,
rhyme or
that's
reason to it.
yeah. I wouldn't go with for me. I don't think the dream interpretation. I probably wouldn't, at least for my first my first dalliance with the movie. Like I probably wouldn't think that, because I don't think that's the type of, like, he's like, as a filmmaker, Brandon Cronenberg is just like much too literal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wouldn't expect him to do that. But I did notice, like, and then, that's part of the thing with Alexander Skarsgård's character, is that, like, he's such an empty vessel. He has to wonder, would he even know? Who would know? There's nothing defining about him, like
Yeah.
that he feels like he could recognize. Because I feel like you're supposed to at some point start kind of, like, especially towards the end, like the last 20 minutes of the movie, you find out that, like, they're rich people have, like, I guess, several clones of Alexander Skarsgård that they're, like, fucking with. And
Yeah.
you have to wonder, like, in that process, did somebody get switched? Did they do it on purpose? Is this actually part of their game? Because they kind of reveal a little bit, like, he was a mark. They did this on purpose.
He was pre-selected,
Yeah.
and they're essentially kind of playing God around him a little bit too, or
Yeah.
showing like that's what they were doing. And what's interesting kind of about that a little bit is just how uh that's all he is to them. Like, he thinks, oh well, I'm a prolific writer, or I think I am, and so you know me for my work, and it's not really the case with
No.
this group of people. And then it's also not the case with his audience, who, or lack thereof, he's not like this
Yeah,
high,
he's a failed writer.
he's a
Like,
failed writer.
he
Yeah.
tried to write a book, then he married rich. He's never really had to worry about much of anything. He's like I said, a kept man, which I think is actually part of the themes, because he is, and that's, part of the kind of pedantic, like, rich people, poor people. Like, you're not really rich, but you married into it, and this is, they'll never accept you, and they'll always be kind of condescending to you in a certain way. And in this movie, they just represent that with, like, a lot of wild shit, a lot of wild, crazy stuff. And there's tons of references to, like, Roman lifestyle, and about eating until you puke. They have
Yeah.
all the disfigured masks that they wear. There's kind of like this, like I said, this embrace of hedonism.
Yeah.
And
This is they're living life like good old Caius Caligula. It's wonderful. They're just
it's good stuff out there on that nice, beautiful resort. Beautiful resort,
Yeah.
beautiful beaches. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I just never, I was, even though things were shocking, I was never shocked, which is maybe a weird way to put it, but
this is, I was telling somebody else this too. This is the one thing I will hand to both Cronenbergs, depending on if the material really asks and allows for it. But we live in such a weird time right now where, I don't know what the best way to put it is, like, movies just aren't horny anymore. I know that's like a blunt way to start that phrase, but like, they're like one of the few guys out here who are still somewhat like watering in the mainstream and showing like full frontal nudity, showing sex, showing love, showing every single kind of intimate thing that people are missing in the mainstream sense of things right now. Like, the most you get is just like somebody, like, showing off their abs and looking muscular or good looking, but there's nothing.
Yeah, there's
like a weird.
There's a prudishness right now with, like, millennials. For some reason, they're very and Zoomers too, very prudish about sex all the time. Every couple of weeks, if you're on Twitter, if you're like have any familiarity with film Twitter, like, there's a discussion about, like, what is and isn't appropriate in a sex scene and a piece of art in a movie, and you're like, what? Like, what are we talking about? Because every once in a while you go back and you watch something made in, like, the 80s and 90s, especially like the 80s. Like, it's a very horny time. It's a very, like, superficially horny time.
Yeah.
What do you think is the horniest decade? Like the 70s, the 60s?
Probably the 70s, honestly.
70s? Yeah, because the 70s they'd go out there, they'd go for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the 90s and then the early 2000s, they would do stuff just to have, like, provocative things to sell their movies at Sundance. Be like, oh no, this dude really, these people really had sex. You should buy this movie. You should definitely distribute this movie. And then you watch it, and it's like the most boring, awful relationship drama. I can't remember. I'm referencing a very specific movie, and I can't remember the name of it because it was just a forgettable thing. It made this big splash when it came out because it had a real sex scene in it.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, Vincent Gallo was getting his dick sucked on film years ago. What are you talking about? The
Brown Bunny. OGs.
The Brown Bunny. I mean, everybody says, oh, it was prosthetic, it was fake. I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't think he's just not that professional. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah. And so like Infinity Pool as an example isn't like that outlandish, but you do get scenes and sequences where you get to see
Yeah.
some action and that you don't typically get to see.
Well,
Uh,
there's an intimate, visceral nature to it that actually like connects with you as a person. Even like, especially like because there's some psychedelic sequences.
yeah.
Like him being another son of a famous director. Remember Panos Cosmatos? You know him?
Hmm.
Beyond the Black Rainbow, Mandy. These guys, they love their psychedelics. Okay, let me tell you something.
I love that neon stuff. I think it was a little too overdone in this
They like
movie
red.
too.
They love the color
Yeah.
red. Everything is red. Red means danger, Jeremy. Watch out. Well, that's what I mean. Like, there's something so fucking literal about these dudes that it is like, to me, it definitely it grates me a little bit. I don't even want to be unfair, but I definitely sometimes feel like a little bit like, oh, fuck. I mean, yeah, I get it, dude. Like, I get it, but you're not in high school. You're not 16. Like when I was 16, I'm like, yeah, dude, everything's gonna be red, and they're gonna be certain color costumes, dude, and we're gonna use symbols here to like draw the eye. So much of that is like you can do it, like do it subtly though. You don't need to
Yep.
literally have like a fucking the lighting guy with a giant gel over the one light, just blasting red over everything. It doesn't need to happen. Okay, not every other shot.
We also don't need a droning soundscape every 5 seconds going whoa.
Yeah. Well, because I think that's their like their version of existential dread. Like, how
Yeah.
do we make people feel existential dread? Well, droning soundscapes, of course.
The Inception sound. We'll just use that. Yeah.
Yeah, just slowed down 500%, played over
Yeah.
and over with somebody crashing a cymbal every once in a while. Um, yeah, I mean, I think I was one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it is I was like, I don't really know if I like it.
Yeah.
I think I like it. I think it's well made. I think some of the performances are really good. I think it has like an interesting kind of element to it. Although I'll say I think the class stuff is the least interesting shit about the movie. I
Yeah.
think his like you had said, he has a fascination with identity. I think that was way more interesting just on like that basic level of this person. This guy going through this experience and then trying to understand himself and also trying to figure out if he's even like really a person. Like what, you know what I mean? Like I don't know,
Mhm.
probably not making any sense, but yeah, he agrees with me.
Well, yeah, it's the Cronenberg touch where everybody, even in the more well-renowned classics, everybody feels kind of cold and alien to our real world in some way, and I think that's kind of a fun way to kind of like pick them out of like the cherry farm and just say like, oh, this is this is a little different. This is not your average sci-fi horror film or something.
Yeah,
It has something to say or it wants to talk about something. So
yeah. I haven't actually watched David Cronenberg Seniors. I haven't watched Crimes of the Future yet. I started it and I fell asleep. I started it way too late. It's not a movie to start late. It's not.
no, and that's the other thing I would say both about that film and this film is that there is some meandering that if you were to watch this late at night, it's it sometimes gets a little grating. We're like, all right, I was a couple times looking at my clock, like, all right, can we speed it up here a little bit here? Because
We
this
get
is the
going,
other
man.
thing. This is almost 2 hours long, and the one thing David has over his son is that he is a fan of the 90-minute movie. And this did not need to be over like 95 minutes. You could have told this very short and sweet.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Like you get the point like immediately.
Yeah.
As soon as the reveal happens about like, oh, you can clone yourself and you got to watch yourself be executed, you're like, I got the whole movie now. I understand everything now. I get it. and then
Yep.
it just says the same thing over and over again. And that's not because I'm like, I consider myself like, super wise or super smart or anything. It's just like I've come to expect that from this generation of filmmaker. Like these really obvious on the nose, sometimes beautifully made. Sometimes beautifully made. I think another person that's like this is Ari Aster.
Yeah.
Hereditary, Midsommar, movies that I like. I enjoy on some. I think I probably prefer Hereditary, but just because I was so stoked that it actually made good on the movie. It didn't revert to the psychodrama. Um, and Midsommar, holy shit, that'd be like a 4-hour conversation.
Yeah.
I don't
I'll just
know.
I'll say to to unpack very briefly those directors and their style. I really want to see more filmmakers of this generation return to main characters that take some sort of initiative and
Mm.
just respond well and fight back and less
Stop,
be so
right?
stop being so
Stop.
passive and
Yeah.
submissive. Yeah.
Let's like lean a little bit back on archetypes. Like
Yeah.
people don't know. If you don't know this, but we're gonna be talking about Rambo, which is a movie that's all about broad archetypes. But kind of lean back on some of those things and stop writing about your fucking self. Like people are so bored of your upper middle class malaise. I swear to God. Like I'm so fucking bored of hearing this perspective and how you fucking hate the world. Like, fuck off. Sorry, did that come off a little strong?
No. That's just enough with the black pill movies. We're done.
Yeah, just give me I don't know. Just give me something that it's so refreshing when you watch movies like, oh, there's a hero and a villain. I'm like, wow, it's fucking great.
Yeah.
Just stripe it straight, the difference between like Brandon and David is like Brandon is like writing about his life. David is or not writing, but making movies about his life. David is making movies about the things he thinks about.
Yeah, or observes. Yeah.
Or observes in society. But Brandon's, if they feel very personal, these movies do feel very personal. And I have to wonder, especially with something like Infinity Pool, I'm like, okay, pal. Okay. I'm sorry that nobody liked you in college. My bad. I'm sorry. Nobody liked you in film school.
Yeah.
Brandon's weird. He smells. His dad's David Cronenberg, though, so we're going to hang out with him.
Oh, yeah. There you go. I'm looking at like a photo of him right now. He's got like an eye piercing, a nose piercing,
Yeah, he looks like he should be in the band Linkin Park or maybe 311, some rap rock group.
Yeah.
Some Canadian rap. I'm sure he's in a band too. I would not be surprised if I looked him up. He's like, yeah, he's in the band like the Wonder Bunnies. Yeah, they're like a post-industrial grindcore band. Oh, cool.
Yeah. He's probably hanging out with like Cody Carpenter and all those oh, we're gonna be just like our dads one day.
Is Cody? But he's not in the filmmaking though, is he?
He's not in the film world as far as I know. He
just tours with his dad because he's like, well, I'd like to make money and play music, so I guess we'll play all of your hits, Dad. That's the things we do for our sons. I can't say people talk about the Nepo baby thing. Mm-hmm. It's never really bothered me. Because I'm like, that's what you would do. And everybody does that. Every industry is birthed of nepotism. If you're a plumber, there's probably like an 80% chance your son is going to be a plumber. Same. I would imagine the same thing would go with filmmaking. But anyways,
sure.
So I guess it's kind of a tepid yes, a tepid like.
Yeah, it's inching towards it. I think I'm still got to ponder and give it a rewatch. But
so okay, we're Letterboxd boys. How many stars are you giving this thing?
I'm fluctuating between 3 and 3.5. I gave it a 3.5, but I'm still I give that half just to Mia Goth. I think just
she really elevates it. Yeah,
she sells the wild nature of that kind of person and honestly got a few laughs out of me too. Like this was genuinely one of the funnier, more relatable in that regard of Brandon Cronenberg's work of his few films.
Because Antiviral and Possessor are very dour. There's no jokes. Infinity Pool has a little bit of a sense of humor to it, like just a little bit, bit. And that's because they're like making fun of what they think is like very wealthy people. So you gotta poke a little fun at them. They gotta be a little eccentric. But yeah, I did the same thing. I gave it 3.5, and when I gave the 3.5, I'm like, this could either go to a 4 or a 3. I'm probably leaning towards more of a 3. I'll definitely watch it again, though. I'll watch it again.
Yeah,
I'll give it another.
Oh, sure.
See how I feel. Well, anyways, thanks, Jeremy, and thanks everybody for watching. And we'll see you very soon, probably within the next week.
And don't dip your toes in the infinity pool.
Don't do it. Don't do it. You don't know who's coming out the other side. You don't know who's getting executed. Watch out. Watch out there.